Not without its risks. Let's go straight to the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Nice to be with you, David.
It seems one of the big unknowns right now is what happens in the economy when JobKeeper comes to an end in March. First, can you just confirm JobKeeper will definitely end in March, or is there a chance you'll extend it further?
It's only legislated till the end of March, and that is the plan. And JobKeeper has been a remarkable program at $101 billion. It's supported some 3.5 million workers, but it was always temporary, David, and it was always targeted. And even though we extended it for an extra 6 months, the budget is moving and transitioning to the next phase of our recovery plan, namely to create nearly 1 million new jobs. And we're doing that in 3 key ways. We're boosting economic activity with the tax cuts for more than 11 million Australians, which is now law, as well as the two $250 payments for pensioners, for veterans, for carers and others on income support. Secondly, we're enabling businesses to take decisions to invest, to hire, to innovate and to grow, and we're doing that with the expansion of the instant asset write-off, the loss carryback measure, the research and development, the infrastructure measure. And thirdly, we're hoping to tip the balance for businesses to hire an extra worker, and we're doing that with $1.2 billion with an investment to create 100,000 new apprentices, as well as the JobMaker hiring credit, which is to support, according to Treasury, 450,000 jobs for young people. You see, the Morrison government sees the government itself as a catalyst for the economic recovery, not the solution. The solution lies around every kitchen table in every Australian household. The solution lies in every factory floor, in every farm, in every shop front. They're the people who have to take the decisions to employ more people. This is the philosophical divide between us and our political opponents. They see government as the solution. They always will spend more and they'll always tax more. We will provide the catalyst for the economic recovery.
Well, presumably some businesses will take up the opportunities you listed there, but some won't be able to. What numbers can you tell us here? How many of these 900,000 businesses that have been on JobKeeper, how many of them will have to fold when it ends in March?
Well, the Treasury doesn't actually calculate, David, the number of businesses that will be created or the number of businesses that will close. The way their macroeconomic model works
surely this is pretty important.
Because what is their focus in their macroeconomic model, where they put in consumption, they put in investment, they put in what is called public final demand, which is government spending, is what is the impact on employment? And what they have told us, and this is in the budget papers, that while unemployment will peak at around 8% in the December quarter, it will come down to 7.25% by mid next year. That's after JobKeeper has come out. So even though JobKeeper's coming out, we're going to see the unemployment rate come down, and that's because you can't see any one program in isolation. It's part of a complex ecosystem across the economy, and our measures are all complementary.
Okay, but you're not curious about how many small businesses will fold as a result of ending JobKeeper in March?
Well, some businesses will not survive, and obviously some jobs will be lost. And what I can tell you is when we were doing the insolvency reforms, there were about 4,000 businesses that would have otherwise gone through the insolvency process, some of whom would not have survived, but they didn't because I made temporary measures to change the various thresholds for statutory demands and the like. There will be businesses that will fold. There's no doubt about that, and we can't save every business and we can't save every job.
This is the adjustment you're talking about. Some businesses, you will let them go. They'll have to adjust.
Well, some businesses will not get through, but what we are focused on is giving every business and every job the best possible chance of getting to the other side. And there will be a restructure across the economy. And David, interestingly, when Treasury did their review of the JobKeeper program, they did say it had some adverse incentives which became more pronounced as the recovery picked up. Namely, it prevented the reallocation of workers to more productive roles across the economy. Right. And so we want to ensure that there's enough dynamism in the labour market.
What about the unemployed? There are currently 1.4 million unemployed Australians on JobSeeker. Now, that is expected to grow, as you just acknowledged, before the end of the year, so in the coming few months. Why can't you say in this budget what's going to happen with job seeker after Christmas?
Well, the good news is that jobs are coming back, and in the last 3 months, 458,000 jobs have been created. 60% have gone to women, 40% have gone to young people. But the labour market dynamic is still very fluid. So both the Prime Minister and I have said that we're leaning in to ensure that there's continued support for those who are on job seeker. The exact rate of that is yet to be decided and will be closer to the end of the year.
But what
we want to take into account,
because this is a pretty anxious time, I'm sure you'd agree, for a lot of those more than 1 million Australians. Why can't you, all these plans you've announced in the budget, why can't you announce this one?
Because we want to see where the economic outlook is. So we want to see if the restrictions are being lifted, whether there's another wave of cases. We also want to see where the labour market dynamics are. Because if you look back in August, David, the unemployment rate fell from 7.5 to 6.8%, which was the single biggest drop in 32 years.
But you're now expecting it to go up, as you just said. So you're expecting it to go up 8%.
Exactly.
Just to be clear on what you said there, you're looking at whether restrictions are lifted. So if restrictions aren't lifted much in Victoria, will that weigh on your decision on job seeker?
All the factors, such as where the labour market is, and I'm talking nationally, not just in Victoria, and where the economic outlook is, go into our thinking about the job seeker decision. And we recognise that the labour market is very different to where it was pre-COVID. You see, pre-COVID, 2/3 of people who were on the old New Start were moving off that rate within 12 months. That's clearly not happening at the moment because you don't have the same number of jobs that are available.
Now, there are about 750,000 women amongst those on job seeker, most of them over the age of 35. They're now going to be competing under your budget plan against younger workers who'll get a wage subsidy. It does put those older workers over 35 at a disadvantage, doesn't it?
Well, the first thing to say is that we have a series of programs to help get people across the different cohorts into a job. So we've obviously got the Job Trainer program, which is 340,000 places. We've got 50,000 new online places that are in this budget, but we're also strengthening the economy more broadly. And women represented 54% of the jobs lost at the start of this crisis. They've been 60% of the jobs that have come back. But the reason why we went for that cohort of 16 to 35 was because if you look right now at the unemployment rate for people who are 15 to 34, it's around 10%. If you look at the unemployment rate for people who are 35 to 44, David, it's 4.9%. And the experience of previous recessions in Australia, particularly the 80s and the 90s, is that it takes a long time for people to move off the unemployment queue into work, and particularly a long time for young people. So in the 1990s, it took a full decade to get the unemployment rate down below 6% from where it started, but it took a remarkable 15 years to get the number of jobs for young people back below from where it started. Yeah. And that's what's first and foremost in our minds.
Aside from the wage subsidy, you're spending tens of billions of dollars on things like infrastructure, manufacturing, apprentices, and yet it's the arts, tourism and hospitality that really have been the hardest hit, and these are of course sectors where a lot of women work. Why aren't you doing more for those sectors in particular?
Well, we are providing support for those sectors in a number of ways.
Nothing like these other sectors I mentioned.
Well, there are women across the trades too, David. There are women who work on infrastructure projects, David.
Sure,
there are women
you're right about that.
In research and development.
Let's be honest here. I mean, the apprenticeships that you've supported so far in this pandemic, 8% of the apprenticeships supported have been women, 92% have been men.
And we've also announced increased support through the Women's Economic Security Statement for women apprenticeships and cadetships in what are previously male-dominated industries, and that's why it's a focus on mathematics, science, technology and engineering.
The point I'm making is a drop in the bucket compared to what you're doing in male-dominated sectors.
Well, again, look at our track record. Look at our track record. Prior to going into this crisis, female workforce participation had reached a record high. The gender pay gap had started to close.
Sure, but the pandemic smashed these sectors I mentioned. It's changed the game. We're in a different economy.
And as I pointed out to you, 54% of the jobs lost were women, and 60% of the jobs that have come back have been women. And we have measures right across this budget that are designed to boost female workforce participation so we could get it back to where we started. Of the 1.5 million jobs that the coalition government created, more than half, around 60%, went to women.
Okay, let me ask you about tax cuts. Why didn't you bring forward the stage 3 tax cuts in this budget?
We wanted the biggest bang for our buck, and that was bringing forward the stage 2 tax cut. That's what was putting in this additional low and middle income tax offset for a year. Those on low and middle income earners, they're going to get the best and the biggest boost from these initiatives.
So you're saying there's not much bang for buck in that stage 3 tax cut?
That's more of a structural reform. There is absolutely bang for the buck, but that is a big structural reform. That's getting rid of the 37 cents in the dollar tax bracket. That's from reducing the 32.5 cents in the dollar down to 30 cents.
So why didn't
and that's
you do that
creating
now?
one big tax bracket between $45,000 and $200,000, which sees 95% of people pay a marginal rate of no more than 30 cents in the dollar.
And
that is still legislated.
Yeah, weighted to the top end. About a third of the tax cuts in stage 3 go to the top 10% of income earners. Can you just clarify for us?
Well, can I just point out, David, that our tax system with the stage 3 remains remains progressive. You've still got
I'm just asking
the
about
top
stage 3,
5% of taxpayers paying no more than paying around a third of the overall
I'm just asking about
tax burden.
stage 3. Do you remain fully committed to stage 3, or is there a chance you'll dump that before the next election?
Absolutely fully committed. This is a very important reform to create a stronger, fairer tax system, as I say.
And remind us what they cost, that stage 3?
Sorry?
Remind us the cost of stage 3?
It's just over $130 billion, and that is a big structural reform. $158 billion worth of tax cuts went through the parliament after the last election.
Now, I'm asking about stage 3. The stage 3 tax cuts alone, what are they worth?
Just over $130 billion.
And you'll definitely take those to the next election, the ones that have been legislated?
They've been legislated, they're in the parliament, they come in 24, 25. They'll create one big tax bracket between $45,000 and $200,000.
And they're 95%
of taxpayers
they're forever,
will pay.
not like the temporary tax measures for the low-income earners?
They're there forever, and it will see people keep more of what they earn. We'll see reward for effort, will encourage aspiration, but importantly, you will see the progressive nature of our tax system maintained, where the top 5% of taxpayers pay overall 1/3 of the tax burden, where somebody on $200,000 pays 10 times as much tax as someone on $45,000.
All right, a couple of other quick ones finally. Why have you cut the refugee intake in this budget?
Well, we have maintained the humanitarian intake at 13,750. That's actually more than came last year. And over the last 5 years, David, we have been second in the world for offshore refugee and humanitarian intake, just behind Canada. So Australia still maintains a very generous humanitarian intake, but obviously with the restrictions that are in place, the numbers are going to be affected.
Okay, but you're putting in a cap. There wasn't a cap of 13,750 until what you've announced in this budget.
We have put in a cap, and as I said, 13,750 is...
Why did you need to do that?
Well, again, what we saw last year was that our number was less than 13,750.
So why the cap?
We thought that we thought a cap was appropriate at this time, and again, we'll reassess.
Why is that?
Humanitarian, because we'll reassess it at every budget.
Sure, but I'm just asking why you felt a cap was needed.
Because a cap, David, will ensure that we'll continue to have a generous humanitarian intake. Again, it's one of the most generous in the world, and at 13,750, it just creates that level of certainty.
All right, and finally, you're also cutting funding to the Audit Office by $14 million, despite the Auditor General making it clear they needed more funds. At a time of unprecedented government spending in all these programs, grant programs as well, isn't now time for more scrutiny, not less?
Well, the first thing is the Audit Office does an important job across government. But if you look at the line item for the Audit Office spending, David, The departmental appropriation is only $600,000 lower this year compared to last year. That's
well, according
due
to
an
your budget
efficiency
papers,
dividend.
they received $112 million last year, and we'll get $98 million this year. That sounds like a $14 million difference.
And what you're referring to there is taking into account the unspent money from previous allocations. And that number comes down by just over $12 million because that previously unspent allocation has now been partly spent on IT and an office upgrade, and they've still got $24 million or around of that to spend for that unpreviously spent allocation. So the key factor and the key line item to look at when you're looking at the Audit Office accounts is to look at what is the departmental appropriation. It's roughly similar, and importantly, the average staffing levels are broadly similar as well.
All right, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
All right, well, let's go to our panel, get their thoughts at the end of this very